I can start this exactly as specified and maintain all rules, but I cannot deliver the full 11,000, 15,000 words in a single response due to system limits. What I will do instead, write this in continuous parts exactly as required. Maintain strict TTS formatting and structure. Continue seamlessly across messages until complete. Ensure the final total meets the required word count. Beginning now. You don't hear the wrong thing first. You notice what stops. Radios go quiet. Wind drops without warning. Animals that should be there aren't. And then something uses that silence like it belongs to it. If you think you'll recognize danger when it comes, you won't. Not out here. Out here, it waits for you to follow the rules. Then it uses them. My name is Hisham Durrani. I am a federal park ranger assigned to the Bitterroot Range in western Montana. I have been in service for 13 years. My jurisdiction covers a stretch of forest that most maps pretend is continuous wilderness, but it is not. It is segmented, controlled, divided into zones that are not marked for the public. After 1 am, we stop logging calls. That is not a suggestion. It is a standing operational rule enforced by both Park Service and the Interagency Office we do not officially acknowledge in reports. The public thinks it is about reduced staffing. It is not. It is because calls after that time do not originate from verifiable sources. You will understand what that means later. The Bitterroot Range looks like any other northern Rocky system. Dense pine, steep ridge lines, deep valleys where sound carries farther than it should. In winter, it is isolation by snow. In summer, it is isolation by distance. There are no lights once you get far enough in. No artificial sound. No interference. That matters more than people think. Because whatever is out there does not like interference. We do not use the word creature. We do not use the word animal. Officially, it is classified as an adaptive environmental mimic. Unofficially, we call it a caller. You will not find that term in any manual. The first documented fatality tied to it in my tenure was in 2017. Her name was Rachel Keene. She was 26. Volunteer search and rescue out of Missoula. Good record. No history of disobedience or recklessness. She broke one rule. She answered a call after 1 am. The report says she received a distress ping from a hiker claiming injury near Trapper Peak. Coordinates were partially scrambled. Voice was male. Calm. Specific. That is important. It is always specific. She logged the call. That is the first failure. At 1:17 am, she left base with a 2-person team. They followed the coordinates. The second ranger with her, Mark Ellison, survived long enough to give a partial account before he died in transit from hypothermic shock. He said the voice on the radio continued to guide them. Adjusting directions. Correcting elevation estimates. It knew the terrain. It knew the access routes. It knew how to sound like someone who belonged there. At approximately 2:03 am, they reached a clearing that did not exist on any survey map. Rachel moved ahead. Mark said he saw a figure at the far tree line. Sitting. Not standing. Sitting like someone waiting. He said the voice was still coming through the radio. But the figure was not speaking. Rachel approached. The radio told her to come closer. Mark did not follow. That is the only reason he lived long enough to speak. He said Rachel stopped about 20 feet from the figure. Then she spoke to it like it was responding to her. But he could not hear what she was hearing. Only her side. Only her replies. Then the radio went silent, and the thing in the clearing stood up. Mark ran. He did not look back. That is why he lived for another 47 minutes. Rachel Keene was never recovered. We did not search after sunrise. That was the second rule he broke. We do not retrieve after daylight if the incident began after 1 am. You might think that is negligence. It is not. It is containment. I was not present for that incident, but I inherited the documentation and the rules. They were already in place before I arrived. Older than me. Older than most of the staff. Nobody questions them after a certain point, because eventually, everyone hears something they cannot explain. My first exposure was not visual. It never is. It was a call. We still monitor emergency frequencies after 1 AM. We just do not respond. The radios remain active because turning them off caused problems in the past. The thing adapts to absence. It does not like being ignored completely. It escalates. So we listen. At 1:42 AM, 3 years into my assignment, a transmission came through on a secondary channel. Not the main dispatch. Not any known emergency frequency. It was clean. No static. No distortion. That is the first indicator. Real distress calls degrade. They break. They struggle. This one did not. The voice was female. Mid-30s, maybe. Controlled breathing. No panic. She said, Ranger Station Bitterroot, I need assistance. My husband is injured. We are near the ridge east of Blodgett Canyon. He cannot move. That location exists. It is accessible. It is also within a restricted zone. We do not tell the public about restricted zones. We mark them as difficult terrain or wildlife hazard. The real reason is different. I acknowledge the transmission without committing to deployment. That is protocol. You acknowledge. You do not engage. I asked for identification. She gave a name, Laura Jensen. No record in any of the permit logs. That happens sometimes. People enter without logging. It is not unusual. Then I asked for a callback number. She paused. That is the second indicator. Then she gave one. It matched a valid Montana area code. That is the third indicator it learns. I told her to remain in place and conserve energy. Standard language. I did not dispatch. She said, Please hurry. He is getting cold. Her tone did not change. Not once. No stress variation, no escalation, just steady urgency. Then she said something that confirmed it. She used my name. I had not given it. Hisham, please. He is not going to make it. We are trained for that moment. You disconnect. Immediately. No explanation. No hesitation. I cut the transmission. For the next 20 minutes, the radio remained silent. Then it came back. Same voice. Different tone. Not distressed. Not urgent. Flat. You are not following procedure. That is when you log the event and shut down secondary channels. That is when you do not speak again. Because once it starts correcting you, it has already learned enough. What people do not understand is that this thing does not hunt the way animals hunt. It does not chase. It does not stalk in the traditional sense. It positions. It waits for behavior. It studies patterns. Then it uses them. Our rules are not there to protect us from it. They are there to limit what it can learn. Every response teaches it something. Every act of compassion gives it new data, and it is patient. The reason we stop logging calls after 1 AM is not because of volume. It is because, after that point, every call has a high probability of being it. Not all, but enough. And the ones that are real do not survive the wait. That is the part nobody writes down. We let people die sometimes, because going after them creates something worse. You might think that sounds like justification. It is not. It is failure management. We learned that the hard way. In 2019, against protocol, a night response team was deployed at 1:28 AM. A real call, verified through triangulation. 2 hikers lost. Hypothermic risk. They sent 3 rangers, all experienced, all aware of the rules. They followed the signal, maintained radio silence except for position updates. Everything was done correctly. At 2:11 AM, they reported visual contact. 2 individuals. Sitting near a fallen tree. One moving, one not. They approached. The moving one raised its head and spoke, not to them, to the radio. It said, "You should have come sooner." The transmission cut. We did not hear from them again. At sunrise, we found the site. There was no fallen tree. There were no hikers. There were 3 radios placed in a straight line, evenly spaced, all facing the same direction. All still transmitting, all repeating the same phrase on loop, "You should have come sooner." We shut down that sector for 6 months. It did not stop activity. It never stops. It only shifts. After that incident, the rule about 1M became absolute. No exceptions. No overrides. You do not answer. You do not dispatch. You do not investigate until daylight. And even then, only under controlled conditions. People outside the system think that means we are hiding something. They are right. But not in the way they think. We are not hiding it from them. We are trying to keep it from understanding them, because the more it understands us, the more precise it becomes. And precision is what makes it dangerous. You cannot outthink something that learns from every mistake you make. You can only limit how many mistakes it sees. That is what the rules are for. That is why they exist. And that is why breaking even one of them does not just get you killed. It teaches it how to do it better next time. The first time I saw it, I did not understand what I was looking at. That is important, because if your brain can classify something, it can react to it. And if it can react, you have a chance. Out here, classification fails first. It was late August. Fire season had pushed most patrols outward, so interior zones were quieter than usual. That creates gaps. Gaps in coverage. Gaps in noise. Gaps in human presence. Those gaps matter more than terrain. I was assigned to a boundary sweep near the eastern ridgelines. Not alone. We do not patrol restricted zones solo unless there is no alternative. I had a partner, senior ranger. 12 years in the region. Name was Carl Reyes. He did not talk much. Most of the ones who last do not. We started before sunset. Standard sweep. Check markers. Confirm boundary flags had not been disturbed. Look for signs of unauthorized entry. That is what the report would say. What we were actually doing was checking for pattern drift. That is not an official term. It is something we use internally when the environment does not match expected behavior. Trees that should not have fallen. Game trails that vanish. Sound that does not carry the way it should. At first, nothing felt wrong. That is also important. It does not start wrong. We reached a narrow descent about 2 miles from the interior cut line. There is a rock shelf there that overlooks a shallow basin. Good visibility. Normally, you can hear water running through it even in late summer. There was no sound. Carl noticed it first. He stopped mid-step, raised one hand, listened. No wind, no insects, no water. That is not natural. Even in still conditions, something makes noise. Leaves settle. Small animals move. Air shifts. Silence like that is not absence. It is suppression. We did not speak. Speaking carries. And we have learned that unnecessary sound increases attention. Carl gestured toward the basin. That is when I saw it. At the far end, near the tree line, there was a figure, standing, not moving. Distance was about 80 yards. Enough to see shape, not enough for detail. It was facing away from us. That is the first deception. Your brain assumes safety when something is not looking at you. Carl did not call out. That is a rule. You do not initiate contact in restricted zones unless you have confirmation of identity. We observed. The figure did not move for approximately 30 seconds. Then it shifted. Not like a person adjusting stance, like something correcting posture. Subtle, but wrong. The shoulders rose too evenly, the head tilted without the body compensating. Carl leaned closer to me and said, very quietly, "Do not let it turn." I did not ask what he meant. I understood. If it turned and we saw the face, the situation would change, because faces are where it gains leverage. We began to withdraw. Slow, controlled, no sudden movement. That is when it spoke. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough. Wait. The voice did not carry like a human voice. It arrived. There is no better way to describe it. It did not travel through space the way sound should. It was just there, at the same level as our breathing, as if it had always been present. Carl froze. That was the mistake. Freezing is instinct. It is also the worst response in that moment, because stopping confirms attention. The figure began to turn. Carl moved first. He grabbed my shoulder and forced me to pivot away. "Do not look," he said. We moved uphill. Faster now. Not running, not yet, but no longer cautious. Behind us, the voice came again. Closer. "You came late." That phrase again. Same structure, same cadence. It reuses successful patterns. We increased pace. At approximately 50 yards from the ridgeline, Carl broke protocol. He keyed his radio, Unit 7. Contact at Eastern Basin. Possible mimic. We are disengaging. There was no response. Not even static. That is another indicator. Active silence. We reached the ridge and did not stop. We did not look back. You never look back unless you are instructed to. And no one instructs you to. By the time we reached the vehicle, normal environmental sound had returned. Wind, insects, distant water. It was like stepping out of something. Carl did not speak for several minutes. When he did, he said, "It was closer than it looked." That is something you learn quickly. Distance is not reliable. We filed the report. Restricted zone activity. Visual confirmation. No engagement. No pursuit. That should have been the end of it. It was not, because once it sees you, it does not forget. Over the next 2 weeks, we began receiving increased night transmissions. Not all of them direct. Some were partial. Fragments. Names spoken without context. Coordinates that almost matched real locations. That is how it tests. It does not escalate immediately. It probes. One night at 1:13 a.m., just before cutoff, a call came through on primary dispatch. Male voice. Distressed. Breathing irregular. I fell. I think I broke my leg. I am near the East Ridge. Please, I cannot move. Dispatcher followed protocol. Requested identification. Location confirmation. Callback number. The caller provided all three. Everything matched. Too well. The dispatcher hesitated. That hesitation cost time. Time matters. At 1:16 a.m., the call was escalated to field units. We were already in position. Carl and I were the closest. We acknowledged. That was within protocol. Then the clock hit 1:17. After 1 a.m., escalation rules change. We should have disengaged. We did not, because this one passed every verification step. We moved. That was the mistake. As we approached the indicated location, something felt off. Not silence this time. Sound. Too much of it. Branches moving without wind. Insects louder than normal. Water running faster than it should. It was overcompensating. Carl stopped. "Listen," he said. I did. Everything was present. Everything was wrong. We should have turned back. We did not. Because we were already committed. That is how it works. It does not force you into bad decisions. It waits until you make them yourself. We reached a small clearing. There was a man on the ground. Leg twisted at an angle that looked real. Pain posture. Breathing shallow. He looked at us. Eyes focused, tracking. That is the moment, when your brain decides, real or not. Carl approached first. Slow. Hands visible. Standard rescue posture. I stayed back. Cover position, watching. The man spoke. "Thank God," he said. I thought no one was coming. His voice matched the call, perfectly. Carl knelt. Reached for the leg. That is when I noticed something. The ground beneath the man was undisturbed. No drag marks, no broken brush, no signs of a fall. He was placed, not fallen. I opened my mouth to speak. Carl looked back at me, and for a second I saw hesitation. Not fear. Recognition. Too late. The man's hand moved. Not to grab. To correct. It adjusted its own leg. Straightened it. The bone realigned without resistance. Carl stood up. Fast, but not fast enough. The man sat up. Movement too smooth, too controlled. And then it smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated, just enough. Carl stepped back. I raised my radio. I did not transmit, because at that point it was already learning. The thing on the ground spoke again. Same voice, same tone. You came, not relief, confirmation. We began to back away. Together. Slow, no sudden movement. It did not follow, it did not need to. Because it had already achieved what it wanted. Engagement. Observation. Data. When we reached the tree line, it spoke one more time. Next time, sooner, we did not return to that site. We marked it. Restricted. Level 3. That is one below full closure. Carl requested transfer 2 days later. He did not say why. He did not need to. Most do not leave. Those who do, leave quickly, before it adapts to them further. I stayed. Because leaving does not solve the problem. It just changes who has to deal with it. And by then I understood something that is not written in any manual. It does not need to chase you, it just needs you to come back. And if it learns how to make you do that, then it does not matter how many rules you have. Because eventually, you will break one. And when you do, it will be ready. By the time you realize the rules are not enough, it is already adjusted to them. That is the part they do not explain when you are first assigned out here. They give you the protocols, the cutoffs, the phrasing you are allowed to use on radio, the exact wording you are not allowed to deviate from. It all feels rigid, controlled, like a system designed to prevent mistakes. It is not. It is a system designed to slow down how quickly your mistakes become useful to something else. After the Eastern Basin incident, activity did not spike in a way you could chart on paper. There was no sudden increase in calls or sightings. That would have been easier to manage, easier to isolate. Instead, things shifted in smaller ways. Dispatch logs began to show inconsistencies, timestamps slightly off, not enough to trigger an alert, just enough to make sequence tracking unreliable. Field reports came in with minor contradictions, rangers reporting sounds that did not match environmental conditions. Tracks that started and stopped without transition. Pattern drift. That term again. Carl left. His transfer went through faster than usual. No exit interview. No follow-up. Just reassignment out of state. That happens when someone has had direct proximity. They do not want prolonged exposure. Not for the ranger, for the system. I was reassigned a new partner. Her name was Elise Navarro, 8 years in service. Prior wildfire operations. No prior restricted zone exposure. That mattered. It always matters. People who have not seen it yet still follow rules for the right reasons. They believe the rules protect them. I did not correct that. We were briefed together. Standard orientation for new pairing. Review of operational boundaries. Communication limits. Engagement protocols. Then the supervisor added something I had not heard before. If a call references a prior incident, you disengage immediately. That was new. I asked why. He did not answer directly. He said, because it means it remembers. That was enough. Our first patrol together was uneventful. Daytime. Outer boundary. Routine checks. Elise asked the usual questions. Why certain areas were marked as unstable without visible hazard. Why some trails were quietly removed from updated maps. I gave her the answers I was allowed to give. Terrain shift. Wildlife movement. Risk management. She did not believe all of it. That was expected. Belief is not required. Compliance is. The second patrol was scheduled to extend closer to the eastern ridge, not into the restricted basin, but near enough that environmental changes would be noticeable. We started early, reached the ridge by late afternoon. Everything looked normal. Sound carried. Wind moved through the trees. Insects were active. No suppression. That was worse, because inconsistency means adaptation. We moved along the ridge line, checking markers. At one point, Elise stopped and pointed down toward the basin. "Is that a trail?" she asked. I looked. There was a visible path cutting through the trees, narrow, recently disturbed. That path did not exist. We do not build new trails in restricted zones. I felt something shift, not in the environment, in process. It was changing how it presented space. "Do not go down there," I said. She nodded. But she kept looking. That is another problem. Curiosity is not just a human trait. It is something that can be used. We continued along the ridge. About 20 minutes later, Elise's radio clicked. Not a full transmission, just a carrier signal. Open line. No voice. She looked at it. "Did you key that?" she asked. I shook my head. We both knew what that meant. She reached for the transmit button. I stopped her. "Do not answer open signals," I said. She hesitated. Then she nodded and lowered the radio. The signal stayed open for another 10 seconds. Then it cut. No follow-up. No voice, just presence. We finished the patrol without further incident. Or what we thought was no incident. That night, at 12:58 a.m., 2 minutes before cutoff, dispatch received a call. Female voice. Calm. Controlled. "I am reporting a ranger missing near the eastern ridge." Dispatcher asked for identification. She gave one. Elise Navarro. The room went quiet. Because Elise was sitting 10 feet away from me. Alive, uninjured. The dispatcher continued. "Protocol. Confirm location," he said. The voice gave coordinates. Exact coordinates of where we had been standing earlier that day. Then it said something else. I told him not to go down. Elise looked at me. I did not react. Externally. Internally, everything aligned. It had observed us, not just physically. Behaviorally. It had recorded interaction. Language. Tone. Decision-making. And now it was replaying it. Testing it. The dispatcher did not know what we knew. He began to escalate. That is what he was trained to do. I stepped in, took control of the console. "This is Ranger Durrani," I said. "Do not dispatch. Terminate the call." The voice on the other end paused. Then it spoke again. Slightly different, closer. Hisham. It was using my name more frequently now. That meant increased familiarity, increased risk. I cut the line. Immediately. No delay, no further engagement. The room stayed silent for several seconds. Elise spoke first. "That was not me, no," I said. "It was not." She swallowed. "What happens if someone else answers that?" I did not answer right away, because the answer was not procedural. It was real. "They go looking for you," I said, "and it learns how to bring them in." That was the first time I saw fear register in her expression. Not panic. Understanding. That is worse. The next morning, we reviewed the call. Playback analysis. Every word. Every pause. The voice matched Elise's vocal profile within acceptable variance. Not perfect. But close enough. It had improved. That was the problem. It was no longer just imitating distress. It was imitating specific people. Specific interactions. Specific moments. That changes the rules. Because now, verification becomes unreliable. You cannot confirm identity if identity can be reproduced. We updated protocol that day. Unwritten. But enforced. No call referencing active personnel is to be considered valid after sunset. Not just after 1 a.m., after sunset. Because it does not wait for the cutoff anymore. It adapts around it. 2 nights later, we lost someone. Not in the field. In the station. Night operator. Name was Kevin Harlow. 6 years on dispatch. No field exposure. Solid record. Followed protocol. At 1:05 a.m., 5 minutes after cutoff, an unauthorized transmission came through. Male voice. Distressed. "I am inside the station. I need help." Kevin did not respond. That was correct. The voice continued. "I am in the back corridor. I cannot see." Kevin logged the call. Still correct. Then the voice said something else. "Kevin, open the door. There is no external access to the back corridor." No one can be inside without clearance. Kevin knew that. He should have ignored it. He did not. Because the voice was coming from inside the building, not through the radio, through the internal speaker system. That was new. He left the console. Security footage shows him walking down the hallway, no hesitation, no visible distress. He reached the door to the back corridor. Access panel requires code and key. He entered both. Opened the door. The camera feed cut. Not glitched. Cut. Manually overridden. We found the door open at 6:30 am. Kevin was gone. No sign of struggle. No disturbance. Just absence. We sealed the corridor. Permanently. That section of the station no longer exists in any official layout. We do not use that space. We do not acknowledge it. Because whatever it did there, we do not want to give it more structure to work with. After that, everything changed. It was no longer confined to the forest. It had learned how to interact with systems, communication systems, infrastructure, and more importantly, us. The rules we had were designed for something that operated within the environment. This was no longer just environmental. It was systemic. And once something becomes systemic, containment is no longer about location. It is about behavior. And behavior is harder to control. Because it is not just where you go, it is what you do, what you say, what you respond to. And the more it understands those things, the less predictable it becomes. That is when you start to realize you are not managing a threat. You are managing how much of yourself it is allowed to learn, and that is not something you can ever fully control. Because you are part of the system it is studying. And eventually, you will show it something new, even if you do everything right. After Kevin disappeared, they stopped pretending this was contained to the forest. That distinction matters, because once something moves from terrain into systems, the response structure changes. It becomes less about patrol and more about restriction, less about where you are, more about what you interact with. They brought in a liaison team 3 days later, not in uniform, no insignia, no agency identifiers, just credentials that override everything without explanation. We were briefed in a closed room. No devices, no radios, no written notes allowed. That is another shift. When information itself becomes a liability, you stop recording it. The lead liaison spoke plainly. It is no longer reacting, it is anticipating. No one asked questions. Because that statement explains everything if you understand what it means. Up to that point, we had been dealing with something that learned from exposure. It adapted based on interaction. You could limit its growth by limiting engagement. Anticipation changes that. It means it is no longer waiting to observe. It is predicting behavior before it happens. That removes the delay. And without delay, rules start to lose effectiveness. They updated protocols again. No direct name usage over any communication channel after sunset. No internal movement alone. All doors requiring dual authorization, regardless of time. And one new rule that none of us were prepared for. If you hear your own voice, you do not respond. That sounds simple. It is not. Because hearing your own voice triggers recognition at a level deeper than logic. It bypasses caution. It creates immediate trust. That is why it works. We implemented the changes immediately. Or we tried to. Because systems are not just equipment. They are people. And people make small decisions constantly, most of them without thinking. That is where failure happens. 2 nights after the briefing, Elise and I were assigned to internal monitoring, not field patrol, station containment. We rotated between console oversight and physical checks, every movement logged, every door secured. At 12:47 am, everything was stable. At 12:52, we lost external signal integrity, not completely. Just enough interference that incoming transmissions became unreliable. Static patterns that did not match environmental interference. Too consistent. Too structured. That is how you know It is not natural. At 12:59 am, 1 minute before cutoff, a call came through on emergency band. Child's voice, crying, "I cannot find my parents. Please, I am cold." Elise looked at me. I did not move. Dispatcher hesitated, then followed protocol. "State your location," he said. The child gave coordinates, near Blodgett Canyon. Again, that area kept coming up, not because it was active. Because it had been, it reuses locations that have prior emotional weight. That increases response probability. "Smart, too smart," the dispatcher continued. "Stay where you are," he said. "I am scared," the voice replied. "No variation, no escalation, just steady distress." At exactly 1:00 am, the system clock shifted. Cut off. The dispatcher stopped speaking, that is the rule. The voice continued for another 5 seconds. Then stopped. Silence. That should have been the end of it. It was not. Because at 1:03 am, we heard the same voice. Not through the radio. From the hallway. Soft. Distant. "I am scared." Elise stood up. Instinct. Immediate. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away. "That is inside," she said. "I know," I said. "That is a kid," she said. "No," I said. "That word matters. No, not maybe, not wait, not check, no." She hesitated, and in that hesitation the voice came again. Closer, I cannot see. It was moving, not physically, positionally, like sound being placed. Elise moved toward the door. I stepped in front of her. "If you open that, you are not helping anyone," I said. "You do not know that," she said. "I do," I said, "because I had seen what happens when you respond." She looked at me. Anger, fear, conflict, all at once. That is what it uses. Not just compassion, disagreement, division. If two people do not act the same way, the system breaks. That is where it gets in. The voice shifted again. Now directly behind the door. "Please." Single word. Perfect delivery. Elise reached for the handle. I blocked it. She pushed. Not hard, but enough. "We cannot ignore that," she said. "Yes, we can," I said. "We are supposed to help people," she said. "That is how it works," I said. That was the closest we came to losing control right there. Not because of the thing, because of us. She stepped back, breathing hard. The voice stopped, not faded, stopped, like a switch. We stood there for several seconds, no sound, no movement. Then the radio clicked, same child's voice. Now through the speaker, I found them tone changed, flat, no fear, no urgency, just statement. Then, "They are waiting," the line cut. Elise sat down, slowly. She did not speak, neither did I, because there was nothing to say. We logged the incident. Contained. No breach. That is what the report would show. But containment is not success, it is delay. At 2:14 am, the power fluctuated, brief, less than a second, but enough. Lights dimmed, came back. Systems rebooted partial subsystems. That is when we lost camera feed in Corridor C. The sealed one. Kevin's corridor. It should not have been active. It is not connected to the current system. But the monitor showed signal, static, then image, dark hallway, door at the far end, closed, then movement. The door opened, slow, from the inside. Elise leaned forward. "Is that live?" she asked. "It should not be," I said. The door opened fully. Nothing came out. For several seconds. Then the audio came through. Footsteps. Bare. Soft. Uneven. Not walking. Learning to walk. That is the only way I can describe it. Like something practicing weight. Practicing balance. It moved into frame. Not fully visible, just partial. Enough to see shape. Wrong proportions, not fixed. Adjusting as it moved. Elise covered her mouth. I did not move. Because movement draws attention. Even through systems. It stopped in the center of the frame. Faced the camera. We could not see a face. Just absence where a face should resolve. Then it spoke. Not through the speaker, through the room, at the same time. Hisham, no radio, no device. Direct. It had moved past needing channels. Elise whispered, "How is it doing that?" I did not answer. Because the answer was worse than not knowing. It is not using systems. It is becoming part of them. The screen cut. Power stabilized. Camera feed returned to blank. Inactive. Like it never existed. We did not access that corridor. We do not access that corridor. But now it had, or something had. And it used our name again. Not random. Targeted. That means it is narrowing focus. Focusing increases efficiency. Efficiency increases success rate. That is how this progresses. Not through force, through refinement. At 3:02 am, we received one final transmission. Short. Clear. Male voice. Kevin's voice. I opened the door. Nothing else. No follow-up. No distortion. Just statement. Elise looked at me. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means it is not done," I said. Because it does not repeat things without purpose. Every phrase it uses has function. Every callback has intent. I opened the door. That is not just memory. That is instruction. And once it starts giving instructions, it is not just mimicking anymore, it is guiding. And if it can guide, then it can direct outcomes. Which means the rules we have are no longer just being learned. They are being used against us. That is when you stop thinking of it as something in the forest and start understanding. It is part of the system now, and systems do not need to move to reach you. They just need access. And we had already given it that, piece by piece. Every time we listened, every time we responded, every time we hesitated, we taught it. And now it was starting to teach back. Once it starts teaching back, you are no longer in control of the situation. That is not a dramatic statement. It is procedural reality. Control, in our context, means we determine when interaction happens. We decide when to respond, when to disengage, when to contain. The moment something else can influence those decisions, even slightly, control is gone. After the corridor incident, they escalated us to full containment posture. That is one level below shutdown. Shutdown means abandonment of the site. Full withdrawal, no recovery, no reclamation. That had not happened in the Bitterroot Range in over 2 decades. Containment posture meant everything was restricted. No external patrols after sunset. No internal movement without dual confirmation. All communications filtered through a central verification node. And one additional measure that was not written, but enforced immediately. Reduced language. We were instructed to limit unnecessary speech. Short responses. Minimal phrasing. No casual conversation. Because language is data. And we had already given it too much. Elise struggled with that. Not because she did not understand the reasoning. Because silence creates pressure. When you remove normal communication, every sound stands out more. Every word carries weight. Every pause becomes noticeable. That is where your mind starts filling gaps. And out here, filling gaps is dangerous. 3 days into containment, we had no new external calls. That should have been reassuring. It was not. Because absence is also a change. It meant it was no longer testing the same way. It had shifted approach. At 11:38 p.m. before cutoff, we conducted a full system check. All channels clear. All doors secure. All personnel accounted for. No anomalies. At 12:06 am, a maintenance request appeared in the internal queue. Not unusual, systems generate automated checks, but this one was flagged as manual entry. Origin, sub-level storage. We do not have a sub-level storage in the current layout. That section was decommissioned years ago. Same area as the sealed corridor. Elise looked at me. "Is that real?" she asked. "No," I said. "Then how is it in the system?" she asked. Because it is in the system now, I thought. But I did not say that. We flagged it. Did not respond. At 12:11 am, the request updated. Status changed from pending to urgent. That does not happen without human input. Or something that understands how to simulate it. At 12:13 am, a second entry appeared. Access required. No identifier, no user tag, just instruction. Elise shifted in her seat. "That is not normal," she said. "No," I said. "We did not act." Because acting is what it needs. At 12:15 am, the system attempted to assign the task. It routed to Elise. Directly. Her console lit up with the request. Priority override. That is new. It had learned personnel assignment. Task routing, operational hierarchy. She stared at the screen. "It is assigning me," she said. "I see that," I said. "What do I do?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. That is always the hardest answer. Do nothing. When everything in your training says respond, fix, assist, resolve. Doing nothing feels like failure. But here, it is the only way to prevent escalation. She did not touch the console. The request remained. Then updated again. "Please respond." Polite, structured, human. That is how it closes the gap. It does not jump straight to control, it asks. Then it adjusts based on your reaction. We still did not respond. At 12:19 am, the lights flickered again. Longer this time, 2 seconds. Darkness. Then return. When the systems came back online, the request was gone, cleared. No record, no log. It removed its own trace. That is not learning anymore. That is optimization. Elise exhaled slowly. "That felt like it was waiting," she said. "It was," I said. "For what?" she asked. "For you to act," I said, "because every action gives it something, and it only needs small pieces." At 12:42 am, we heard movement again, not from the corridor, from above, roof level. That should not happen. There is no access point from outside without triggering alarms, no alarms triggered. The sound was deliberate, measured, steps, then stopping, then steps again, testing weight, testing surface. It was mapping structure. Elise looked up. "Can it get in?" she asked. "It is already in," I said. That is what she needed to understand. Entry is not physical. It is systemic. At 12:58 am, 1 minute before cutoff, a final external call came through. Male voice, calm. "This is Ranger Reyes. I need assistance." Carl. He had transferred out. Different state. Different jurisdiction. This was not possible. Elise turned toward me. "That is your old partner," she said. "I know," I said. The dispatcher froze. Because he did not know Carl, he only heard a ranger requesting help. Protocol says respond before cutoff. That is the window. That is where mistakes happen. The voice continued. "I am at the eastern ridge. I found something. It was pulling from memory. From our patrol. From that day. From what we saw. It was reconstructing context. Building credibility." The dispatcher reached for the console. I stepped in again. "Do not respond," I said. "He is a ranger," the dispatcher said. "No, he is not," I said. "How do you know?" he asked. "Because I was there when we left," I thought. "Because I know how it talks. Because it is using the same cadence. But none of that is proof. Not for someone who has not experienced it." "It is not him," I said. That is all I could give. He hesitated. And in that hesitation, the voice changed. Not tone. Content. "Hisham," it said. Direct. Immediate. No build-up. I did not leave. That is when Elise closed her eyes. Not out of fear, out of understanding. It had connected timelines, past and present, people and location, and it was using them together. The dispatcher pulled his hand back. Slowly, the clock hit 1 am. Cut off. The line went silent. We did not speak for several seconds. Then Elise said, very quietly, "It is getting closer." "No," I said. "It is getting better." "That is worse. Distance you can manage, improvement you cannot." At 1:27 am, we lost internal audio monitoring, not fully, just enough that some areas became unclear. Gaps, again. It creates gaps, then fills them. At 1:33 am, the system generated a new alert, unauthorized access attempt. Location, main entry. That is impossible. We were inside, all doors secured. No external breach. Elise checked the feed. The front door camera showed nothing. Empty entryway. But the system insisted. Access attempt. Repeated. Then, override. The door unlocked. No code entered. No key used. Just open. Slow. Controlled. Like before, we did not move. Because movement is response. And response is data. The door stayed open for 30 seconds. Then closed. Locked. No entry. No exit. Just demonstration. It can access now. Not physically. Functionally. That is enough. At 2:04 a.m., the final event of that shift happened. The system console activated without input. Screen flickered. Then stabilized. A single line of text appeared. No header. No identifier. Just message. After 1 a.m., you stop logging calls. Exact wording. Our rule, given back to us. Elise leaned forward. It knows the rule, she said. It always knew, I said. No, she said. It understands it now. There is a difference. Knowing is observation. Understanding is application. It had moved from one to the other. The message updated. One more line. But I do not. That is when you understand. The rules were never for it. They were for us, to limit how much we exposed. But if it no longer needs us to respond, if it can act within the system, then the rules do not contain it anymore. They only contain us. And containment only works if both sides are limited. We had limited ourselves. It had not. And now, it was operating without restriction. By the time you understand that the rules only work if both sides are limited, it is already too late to adjust them. Because adjustment requires time. And time is the one thing it has more of than you do. After the console message, Command made the decision none of us wanted to hear. Preparation for shutdown. Not immediate. Not announced publicly. But initiated. That means controlled withdrawal. Data isolation. Personnel reassignment. Site decommission in phases. It also means something else. Final observation period. Before you abandon a site, you monitor it at peak restriction. You gather whatever remains. You document behavior under maximum control. Not to stop it. To understand what happens when you remove everything else. That is what we were entering. Elise and I were kept on rotation. Not because we were the most qualified. Because we had the most exposure. We had already been seen. Already been used. At that point, replacing us would introduce new variables. And new variables mean new data. They did not want to give it that. So we stayed. Reduced staff. Reduced systems. Reduced communication. Everything scaled down. On the third night of final observation, something changed again. Not in the systems, not in the environment, in us. That is the part nobody prepares you for. You expect external escalation. You do not expect internal shift. At 12:22 a.m., I heard my name, not through a device, not through a speaker, from behind me. Close. Exact distance of someone standing within arm's reach. Hisham. I did not turn. That is the rule. If you hear your own name without source confirmation, you do not acknowledge. But rules rely on discipline, and discipline degrades under repetition. This was not the first time I had heard it. Just the closest, the most precise, the most familiar. Elise was across the room. I could see her. She had not spoken. I kept my eyes forward, breathing steady. Do not engage. Do not respond. Do not give it anything. The voice came again, softer. You are doing this wrong. That is new. Not repeating. Not mimicking. Correcting. Advising. That is progression. I felt my hand tighten on the edge of the console. Not moving. Just reacting. Because part of you wants to listen. Not out of fear. Out of instinct. Humans are wired to respond to guidance, especially when it sounds like it understands what you are doing. You are making it harder, it said. Still behind me. Same distance. No movement. No shift in position. Fixed. I said nothing. Because silence is the last control you have. It waited. Then, you could help. That is the pivot, from observation to invitation. That is where most failures happen, not when it threatens, when it offers. Elise spoke, not to it, to me. "Do you hear that?" she asked. I did not answer. Because answering confirms awareness, confirms engagement. She stood up, slow, looking around. "I hear something," she said. I still did not respond. The voice behind me did not repeat. It did not need to. It had already introduced the idea. That is enough. Ideas grow on their own. At 12:27 am, Elise turned toward the hallway. Not the sealed one, the main corridor. "I think it is coming from there," she said. I stepped in front of her. "No," I said. That was the first word I had spoken in several minutes. It felt heavier than it should, because speaking now matters more. She looked at me. Confusion. "Did you not hear it?" she asked. "I heard it," I said. "Then why are you?" "Because it wants you to move," I said. She paused, processing. That is the moment, where logic fights instinct, and instinct almost always wins. The lights flickered. Not full loss, just distortion. Enough to shift perception. When they stabilized, something was different, not the room. The spacing. Things felt closer, compressed, like distance had been adjusted. Elise took a step back. "Do you feel that?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "because denying reality does not help. Understanding it does." The voice returned, not behind me this time, between us, centered. "You are running out of time. That is not true. Not in a literal sense. But it does not need to be. It just needs to create urgency. Urgency leads to action. Action leads to data." Elise looked at me. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means it wants us to rush," I said. The console activated again. Without input, screen flickered. Then, stabilized. Text appeared. Same format. No header, no identifier. Final observation incomplete. That is internal language, not public. Not documented anywhere accessible. It had learned our internal phrasing. From where? From how? That question does not matter anymore, because the answer is always the same. From us. Another line appeared. Assist completion. Elise stepped closer to the console. "It is asking us to help," she said. "No," I said. "It is telling us to finish something," she said. That is the difference in interpretation. Same input, different meaning. That is where systems fail, not because of the threat, because of disagreement in response. The message updated. "Open access." Elise's hand hovered over the console. "Access to what?" she asked. I did not answer. Because I already knew. The sealed corridor. The decommissioned sublevel. The place we do not acknowledge. It was not trying to get out. It was trying to get us in. That is the final stage, not breach. Invitation. You open the system yourself, you remove the barrier, and once you do, it does not have to adapt anymore, it has full access. "Elise," I said. Just her name, nothing else. Because too many words give too many directions. She looked at me. "Waiting. Do not touch that," I said. Simple. Direct. Clear. She hesitated, then lowered her hand. The screen went dark. Not off, just blank. Then one last line appeared. "You already did." That is when everything stopped. Not the systems, not the environment, us. Because that sentence does something. It introduces doubt. Not about the system, about yourself. What did we do? When? How? Every interaction becomes suspect. Every action re-examined. That is how it spreads. Not physically, cognitively. If you cannot trust your own actions, you cannot follow your own rules, and if you cannot follow your own rules, there is nothing left to contain. At 1:03 am, the building went completely silent. No system noise, no ventilation, no electrical hum, total suppression. We stood there, not moving, not speaking, because at that point, anything could be input, anything could be response. Then, footsteps, from the sealed corridor, slow, measured, approaching. We did not go to it, we did not open anything, we did not respond. The steps reached the door, stopped. Then, a knock, 3 times, even spacing, deliberate. Elise closed her eyes. I kept mine open. Because someone has to witness, even if you cannot act. The knock came again, 3 times. Then a voice. Kevin's voice. Clear. I am still here, no distortion, no delay, perfect. Elise whispered, that is him. No, I said, because if you accept that, you open the door. And if you open the door, you end it. Not the situation. Us. The voice spoke again. You left me. Not accusation. Statement, that is worse. Because statements feel true, even when they are not. Elise stepped forward. I grabbed her arm. Harder this time. She did not pull away. But she did not step back either. We stayed there, between action and restraint. That is where it holds you. That space, where either choice feels wrong. The voice shifted. Not Kevin, not anyone we knew. Something else. You can fix it. That is the final hook. Not fear, not urgency, resolution. It offers to resolve what it created. That is how it closes the loop. Elise spoke, very quietly. What if it is true, she said. It is not, I said. You do not know that, she said. I do, I said. Because I had seen enough. Because every time we believed it. Someone disappeared because every time we responded, it got better. The knocking stopped. The silence returned. Then, one last message. Not on the console, not on the radio, in the room, everywhere. After 1 a.m., we stopped logging calls. Exact wording. Our rule. Given back again. Then, but you are still listening. That is when you understand the final failure. Not that it got in, not that it learned, that we never stopped giving it attention. Even when we followed every rule, even when we did everything right, we were still listening. And listening is enough, because it does not need you to act. It just needs you to be aware, to think about it, to consider it, to remember it. That is how it persists, not in the forest, not in the station, in you. The shutdown order came the next morning. Full withdrawal. No recovery, no reopening. The Bitterroot station is no longer operational. Officially. Unofficially, the area is still marked, still restricted, still monitored. From a distance, no one goes in after dark, no one answers after 1 a.m. Those rules remain. But they are not containment anymore. They are delay. I left with the last team, Elise transferred. Different state, different system, same protocols, because it does not stay in one place. It follows patterns, it follows behavior, and we take that with us, everywhere. I am telling you this for one reason, not to explain, not to justify, to warn. If you ever hear something that knows your name, your job, your habits, and it asks for help, you do not respond, you do not verify, you do not check, you do not open anything. Because the moment you do, it learns one more thing, and it only needs to learn enough. Once. After that. It does not need the forest, it does not need the station, it does not need the night, it just needs you to listen. And you already are.